Welcome back, Leominsterites. This is a special April and May episode of Representing Leominster as we're getting ready for the House budget debate, and I could not be more thrilled to be joined with a good friend, Rep. Kim Ferguson, who is coming to us for the second time on Representing Leominster, but in the new studios. We just did a little tour, so you got to check out this new space that Leominster is really lucky to have.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. We're getting ready for the budget debate. This is my fourth term. How many terms have you been serving your district?
So I am currently in my 7th term. So hard to believe, time flies.
Yeah.
And it's still an honor to be here. I love it. Every day is different. So I always say to everyone, when you lose that excitement and when it no longer feels special and an honor to be there, it's time to go. Yeah. So it's really great to be back with you, though.
Yeah, and I'm really lucky, and I remind my constituents, but I don't think they understand how lucky I am to represent just the city of Leominster. Can you list all the communities in your district?
I can.
Originally, has it changed?
It changed just a little bit.
Okay.
So I'm fortunate. I used to have 6 towns, and then due to redistricting, I'm down to 5. When I started, I had 7. So I keep
We're seeing the population kind of move.
Yeah, due to the population shift. So currently, the 1st Worcester District is Holden, Princeton, Paxton, Rutland, and Westminster.
Awesome.
So, yeah, all very different towns. I range from 20,000 residents down to about 3,800. So, and then everything in between. So it's quite a range of size and constituents, and the towns are all very different. So it's interesting.
Yeah, and I imagine it's a challenge, especially when we're looking ahead to budget week, to balance kind of all of those needs of really diverse communities as you're advocating for individual projects for them.
It is, but you know, over the years, I think, again, just like children, right? You get to know them and their personalities and their likes and their needs and things like that. So I think just like you do, over the year, you have the conversations and you kind of know on your radar what's coming up, what are issues for them. And so then when it becomes time to sit down and talk about if you need amendments and things like that, you kind of have it on your radar screen. And every once in a while they come across with something that comes from outer space that you then have to sit down and talk about. But they've been really good partners for me, so I've been lucky.
And one of the things that I try to remind Leominster advocates that it's not just the budget. The budget happens every year, but there are a lot of other grant opportunities that our communities can be really competitive for, and to help the executive administration know kind of like where do they need to be prioritizing their funds and making sure it's coming out to North Central Mass and getting west of 495.
Right. And I think over the past several years, everyone has stepped up to try to get the message out and alert people when grants are happening or when there's another funding opportunity. Because to your point, the budget's, you know, in the House, the budget's one time. It's in April, and then we wait for the Senate, and then we have to wait till we get to the finish line, you know, by hopefully June 30th. But all throughout the year, there are other opportunities for grants and other funding sources, so it's really helpful.
We've had, since this new year, a few of the members of the North Central delegation. I'm hoping to get you all in. Can you talk a little bit about what it's like to be a part of this delegation? Something that I think is really special is we don't just have Democrats or Republicans, we also have the only independent member of the House, and when we can speak with one voice, I think that's really powerful.
It is, and you know, you and I have talked about this a lot too, right? Certainly you're part of the bigger delegation. We're part of the Women's Caucus. There are other caucuses that we're part of, you know, for our advocacy and our work. And but the North Central delegation, I truly feel is really special. And, you know, we're able to bring everyone together and say, regardless of your party affiliation, which most of the time, we don't even talk about that kind of stuff. It's really about what does our region need? What's an issue that's important here? You know, how can we come together either through letter writing campaigns, meetings, just general advocacy? And how do we work together for this region to make it better? And I really think that we have a nice cohesive group that respects each other, that communicates well, and, you know, is also not afraid to bring an issue forward and say, all right, this is what's going on. Let's sit down and talk about how it impacts each one of you and what it means to your towns or your communities. So it's a really good group.
Yeah, I think that's been something that has been really helpful for me coming in to have this really strong identity of North Central. And, you know, some of that is necessity. In order to compete with the Boston delegation, like we really have to grow our voice together. But also, we have a lot of the same issues that impact our region around food insecurity, around housing access, all of these different things that we've been able to come together, healthcare access.
I was just going to say, like, that's a big one. And again, when one of us gets the call, the nice thing is we're able to reach out. Even, I mean, we do obviously with a lot of texts like, hey, you know, did everyone get this email? Let's talk about it on a Zoom, whatever. But there are so many issues that impact all of our constituents that it's great to be able to come together, and we trust each other that we can sit there and communicate about things and kind of brainstorm for the best solution. So it's been, I will say, it is not like that throughout the Commonwealth, and we are really lucky, you know, that we have the people that we have and that we work so well together. So thank you. One
of the issues I love that you have been working on is animal welfare, and you have a bill around needs dogs and the misrepresentation of service animals and kind of how that can impact folks who really do rely on their service animals. Can you talk a little bit about what that legislation does and how you've been working? Because Needs is in your district as well, right?
Right. Needs, although it's an internationally recognized organization with dogs all over the world now, actually, with their handlers, and they obviously work in teams. It is based in Princeton, Massachusetts, and I'm quite proud of that fact. And they certainly you know, raise puppies. They actually have a new facility now, which I think you were at.
I haven't gotten to it, so invite me the next time.
I will. They have a beautiful new facility. They have a breeding center. They have all their training centers. They have a client house where the clients can actually, when they are matched with their dog, they go and they actually live there for a couple of weeks towards the end of the training. Awesome. So they can, you know, they work in very small groups and do that. But yeah, the issue is obviously we have a major problem across the country, really, with misrepresenting service animals. And some people may feel that, you know, they're just putting a vest on their pet so they love their pet and they can gain more access to restaurants and stores and basically any kind of place they want to go to. But the issue becomes that often the pet is not well trained, is not a true service animal, and it's a huge disservice to the actual service animal and their handler. Because that dog is trained to do a multitude of tasks. Many times they can be life-saving tasks. They can be medical alert type tasks. They can be things to help our veterans with PTSD and others that have that. They can be, you know, for someone with a hearing loss. They can be for socialization with kids with autism. They can do a range of things. Folks that are in wheelchairs, they help with picking up things and you know, accessing things for them. There's just so much that these highly trained dogs, it takes 2 years to train them, can do. And if you notice, actually, when you see a true service dog working, you hardly realize they're there. Like if you're in a restaurant, they're usually curled up under the table, you know, doing their thing, not sitting on the table eating off someone's plate, which is what we have issues with, right? And so for business owners too, it's very difficult because the untrained animals can be disruptive or just they don't know how to behave. It's not their fault. So we've run into a lot of issues before the pandemic about this. Then unfortunately for all of us, the pandemic hit and it kind of fell by the wayside. People weren't out. They weren't, you know, at restaurants and bars and things like that with the dogs. And now they're back and, you know, it's escalating again. So we do have a bill that we spent a lot of time on that focuses on what 27 other states have already done. And that's make it fraudulent behavior. So we're still working on it. We have a commission now that we're trying to get across the finish line, made it all the way through to the Senate at the end of last term and just didn't quite get it there.
The story of so many of our bills.
Yeah, so, you know, I was proud of the fact that it made it that far, but we're coming back again this year. We've already actually testified at a hearing. So early in the process. And thank you for all your help and support. And hopefully this time, you know, it's had a lot of attention and nobody seems to disagree with it except for people that are committing fraud. So we hope that we can do something this term. So thank you for asking.
Yeah, no, and this is why I've recruited you to work on our puppies and kittens bill around ending puppy mill purchases, because in Massachusetts, we don't have puppy mills. We don't allow puppy mills or kitten mills to run because they're really unsafe. They're a consumer protection issue for the folks who are adopting these animals. And this bill has been around a whole lot longer than I have been. And it's a bipartisan bill. I've started working with Senator O'Connor and really am excited to bring you to the table and with again, a kind of a compromise bill to say for those 6 businesses that are left that are operating that still purchase their dogs from these males out of state, like we'll table that for a little bit and let you continue, and your communities can decide whether or not they still want to have this happen. But statewide, we're not going to allow more to come up.
To open.
And the industry itself has moved. So in the short time I've been working, the few years I've been working on the bill, we've moved from about a dozen shops to half that because it's not profitable. There are so many health consequences of dogs and cats and rabbits being raised in this way. And we have lots of pets that need forever homes that are at shelters. And so a lot of these pet shops are partnering with shelter organizations in their community to help make those connections. Often cheaper for the families who are adopting these.
And safer. A lot safer. I mean, you feel, certainly we've been contacted by folks that have had the unfortunate experience of getting a sick animal, or sometimes in the ultimate worst case have had to put it down because of how ill it was. And that just breaks my heart in general, just for the family, but for the animal, obviously. And to your point, we were talking about this earlier, when you file a piece of legislation, right, and that one's been around for a while, over the years, you do make tweaks to it. You do make it an even better bill. You do have to make some compromises to hopefully get it across the finish line. And when you and I talked about this bill months ago, I've always been a supporter of it, but I really was so happy that you asked me to be part of it. And, you know, I think it is critical that we try to get it done again this term. And I was more than happy to jump on board and lend my support. So hopefully we can get that hearing and start moving.
It's an important bill. And so I'm really, really glad to have you working with us on it. One of the changes coming out of the pandemic, there's some new things that happened in the legislature in terms of hybrid hearings that I'm really excited are here to stay. Are there things that you learned kind of in the pandemic that changed the way that you do your job that make it easier, that are actually silver linings to everything we experienced?
You know, we talk about that a lot, right? Those certainly were the worst times that we've had to experience, and incredibly stressful and scary. And, you know, all of us had to keep working right through it and working with our constituents. And there were so many people that were so needy and frightened. And, you know, I remember those days on the phone with you, on Zooms with you, and all of us, again, as a delegation, we're coming together. You know, I think one of the things that came out of it was the whole ability to have meetings over Zoom. And at one point I was so sick of Zoom, I never wanted to hear the word Zoom again, or Teams or any of that. But I think from a convenience standpoint, people aren't needing to drive down to Boston to find me, or wait till, you know, I can meet in the district with them based on my crazy schedule. They're able to say to me, hey, you know, can we jump on a Zoom at 4:30 this afternoon and, you know, just quickly go through that? So some of the technology that we've been able to use more, things like the hybrid hearings. I can't tell you how many constituents have already said to me, thank you for doing that and keeping that process in place, because for those folks that have been down to the hearings, they know it's a long day. You're dealing with traffic, you're dealing with parking, you're dealing with a crowded hearing room. You're sitting there for hours waiting to be called. And for some people, it's a great experience maybe once, but to be able to, you know that you can testify safely at home, and, you know, especially for people that have issues commuting, people with physical issues that, you know, it just makes it even more of a difficult day. I think that, you know, that came out of it, something that's really, really productive and helpful. So, I mean, that would be my number one thing, I think, would be the technology that way.
So many of us from Central, Western Mass, Cape and the Islands had like pitched this hybrid hearing before the pandemic, and we're told we can't figure it out, like that can't happen. And we were like, what about county locations? So you just have to drive to a place in Worcester, and you just have to drive to a place in Berkshire County. And they were like, we can't figure that out. So it's been nice. And we've seen it kind of in our communities on the telehealth side, right? Like we really had to ramp up telehealth, and the way that it made mental health care so much more accessible is huge, huge.
Yeah, and so much more to do in that area too. And I know you've been a leader in that. And again, it came at a difficult time, but at the right time. And now we're able to continue on with some of that to get people the help that they really need. So that needs to continue.
Yeah,
more work to be done.
The workforce challenges, I think we see it in mental health care, we see it in human services, we see it kind of like in all of these different important spaces, and getting folks trained and into those jobs as quickly as possible has been kind of the next big issue we're going to be facing.
Right, and we've had these discussions with folks too around the table that we really have tried to step up with more funds for things and program and, you know, expanding like the number of beds and things like that. But if you don't have the highly trained people there, they're no, you know, we're waiting and they're no good to us. So hopefully we can really work some more on that. I know we're desperately trying to support people and get them in the fields as prepared as best as we can. So
yeah, it's
still work to be done.
It's my 4th term serving on mental health, substance use, and recovery, and it's like, right, a blessing and just like a heartbreak to continue to see the same challenges that we're dealing with, and every time we take a couple steps forward, we take some equal steps back, and to make sure that folks have access to these services, and that people who really want to get into this field can afford to do it and can afford to stay.
Right.
And we see that in elder services. We see that in DDS services. We're working with so many clients who still aren't back to full time in their day placements.
Right.
And just
after all this time.
What kind of like how hard it is for them to not have access to their community and for their families to be able to support them.
Right, right. And that isolation, as we learned during the pandemic, is not helpful for anyone. So to still have it going on makes it even more difficult. So
looking ahead to the new session, is there anything you're really excited to be digging into, looking forward to?
Oh, well, it's already started off with a big bang, right? We jumped right in. It's been really busy. I am very fortunate that I do have a leadership role as the assistant minority leader in the House. So I have a lot of tasks and things to do week to week, dealing with that and the overall management, working with our caucus and working with everyone on their bills, their budget priorities, committee assignments, things like that. So I'm glad that the committee assignment part is over with. I'm back on the education committee, which I'm thrilled to be back on. I had stepped away from that to give another member the opportunity as ranking member. So I was off for 2 years, the only 2 years I've ever missed. And so I'm really happy to be back on that. And again, education is always a current topic that there are a myriad of things that we could talk about just related to that, and funding and Chapter 70 and the SOA and all of that. So I'm really happy to be back on that committee. But overall, I mean, I think we have some nice bills put forward by the Women's Caucus that we're both part of, really important issues to women across the Commonwealth, things like healthcare, but also economic opportunity and supporting women in other roles that way. So that's about it. And then just focusing on moving some of my bills. So let's get through the budget and work on the service dog bill. I have a food labeling bill that I think is really important, and a myriad of others. So we'll see. But and you have a lot going on.
We have a lot, and so we're filming this in April, and I just have to thank the Women's Caucus for really embracing Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and we'll be honoring Denim Day next week, and really it's been a great opportunity to co-chair the Sexual Violence Task Force within the Women's Caucus and really elevate this work. And I've gotten to work with the minority leader, Brad Jones, on a lot of bills related to the backlog around untested rape kits. And that has been the issue that just like keeps unraveling, and we keep finding more and more gaps in the law. And it's been really great to work with so many awesome people who say, okay, like we've got a new challenge. Let's figure out how to close this loophole and make sure that survivors' voices and stories are being honored and respected, and we're seeking justice for them.
Well, I have to commend you on the short time. I know you say like 4th term, but it's still considered short when you look at folks' terms down there. But the way that you've been able to navigate your way through down there and bring issues like this that are so important to the foreground and be able to actually be effective and get something done. And I know the work that you did on the rape kits was amazing, and thanks to you, it's being implemented and we're able to move forward. So, and that's just one thing. I know you've got a lot going on and a lot of important pieces of legislation you're working on, but you've really been a leader. And it shows in your committee assignments and the other roles that they're giving you to do, and the fact that you're a spokesperson for so much down there. So thank you.
Well, thank you. As we're wrapping up, one of the things we always like to ask our guests, especially who are elected officials, do you have any advice on someone who wants to be a stronger advocate, get involved in their community or at the state level on a policy issue? Like, how can folks strengthen their advocacy?
So I love talking about this because, you know, from kids in the schools all the way up to like, adults you meet at meetings, right? I mean, my biggest piece of advice is get involved, follow what's going on in your local community, watch a few meetings, read up about what's going on. You know, you have great, your local access TV plays and replays shows and interviews and meetings and things like that. So get involved that way. And when you have a question, reach out to whether it's city councilors, select board people, school committee people, us, reps, senators. It's, you know, with the technology, you can send an email and we don't bite, we don't yell, we're not nasty. You know, we often will say like, that's a really great point, or thanks for filling me in about that, or this is what I think on that. So I really think that first step is, you know, getting involved, speaking up, and the minimum voting, whether it's in the local election or all the way up. You know, I think we pay a lot of attention to the bigger nationwide elections and statewide elections, but really at the local level, it's important that people are paying attention as well and getting involved. And then you never know, you know, you might want to join a board or a committee, and we really need volunteers, especially at the local level. So find that interest and go for it.
Yeah, I think for a lot of folks who are watching national politics and the hyper-partisanship of it, right? Like I always say when I see Congressman McGovern, I'm like, I'm really grateful you're there and I'm here. Like because we do like 99% of what we work on, you said it earlier, we want the same thing for our communities. We want our communities to thrive. Sometimes we have different ideas on how to get there, but like that's where the good debate can happen and really have conversations about where do those investments need to go? What are those policy changes to make sure folks really can support themselves, their families, grow small businesses, to really just make our communities stronger.
Right, and having that seat at the table to be able to kind of hash some of that out. And like you said, you can debate, you can have differing opinions, but be respectful. Say what what you feel and why. That's what I always say to people too. Back it up. Don't just yell at me and tell me, you're this, you're that, do this, whatever. Tell me why. And I think that we're able to do that, and we often produce better language and better bills because of that blending and differing opinions. So,
and some of my favorite bills that I've worked on have come from constituents, and one that major success last session made it through committee into a bill that passed in the House, which was a big deal. It didn't make it over the finish line, didn't make it to the governor's desk, but to have that momentum coming into this new session, we're always building upon kind of what we did in the last session. What an incredible story for this constituent who had this story that impacted her family and wanted to make sure that her, other families weren't going to be impacted in the same way.
And it can often take several years. People don't understand that. It's disappointing for us. It's disappointing for them. It can take several years to actually get that final product across the finish line. So you just have to be tenacious and patient. So we learn patience.
For sure. It is a very slow and deliberative process. A lot of reasons it's good, and a lot of reasons it can be frustrating.
Absolutely.
But you got to be in it for the long haul, and that's a lot of what I talk about with advocates who care. We worked on banning female genital mutilation, and folks would be like, "Why have we not done this yet?" Right? It's so many other states have done this, but it took a lot of conversations and figuring out where that hesitation or where that opposition was coming from, which often is well-meaning, and just trying to figure out okay, how do you fix and tweak the bill to address
Right,
it.
and then you end up with a better bill.
Yeah.
So it's all worth it.
Well, thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
on and chatting with me. And I'm so looking forward to everything that we're going to get to do together in
It
this
was
upcoming
great.
session.
Anytime. Thank you so much for having me. It's
Thanks.
a pleasure.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in.